Good evening, everybody. My name is Bill Michael, and it's my privilege to be the Executive Director of UChicago Arts and the Reva and David Logan Center for the Arts, and I'm thrilled to be joined by my colleague Travis Jackson, Associate Professor in Music in the Department of Music, to welcome you to what is sure to be a very special night. This is actually the third year that we've had Steve Coleman and the Five Elements in residence here at the Logan Center and on the south side of Chicago in partnership with our friends at the Rebuild Foundation, the Music Department, and with support of the Reva and David Logan Foundation and so many here on campus, and also the Jazz Institute of Chicago. And about 3.5 years ago, Lauren Deutsch called me and said she knew this really spectacular saxophonist, and would I consider meeting with him. I, of course, thought it was to try to, so that I could meet him, but it became very clear very quickly that Steve wanted to meet me to figure out if this was going to be a community that he wanted to be in at the university here as he thought about coming home to the South Side. And we're thrilled that for the last 3 years, Steve has joined us in really incredible ways. And over the last couple of weeks, Steve and the Five Elements have partnered with a wide range of terrific organizations, from Free Right to do work with youth in our juvenile justice system, to Future Ties on the South Side, and the International Music Workshop. So besides doing really incredible work on our campus with our own students, they also did a lot of really great work with youth. And I know when I talked to Steve 3 years ago, one of the things that was really important to him was to continue this tradition of mentorship. And I ask you to join me in raising a round of applause for these great musicians that have spent the last 3 years bringing that tradition of mentorship back to the South Side. In addition to working with great youth this year, they've also been working with our students here at the university. And many of you, I'm sure, know Mwata Bowden, who leads our incredible jazz sextet, who will be back on this stage on the 31st of May. And Mwata was telling me just earlier today that Steve and these incredible musicians have opened up new perspectives for our students in our jazz sextet and have challenged them in all sorts of exciting and dynamic ways. So much so that Mwata tells me that they're going to create a new piece based on what they learned from Steve during his couple of weeks here. So it's really exciting to think about the legacy that Steve's made here, and it is therefore all the more fitting that last spring the university decided to honor Steve with the Rosenberger Medal, which is given out once each year to a dynamic artist from anywhere in the world who has contributed really spectacular things to society and humanity. He came back in June of last year to receive that medal during our convocation. And one of the things you agree to do when you get that medal is to come back and do a public performance and lecture. And so we are thrilled that you are joining us tonight for that public performance and lecture. We're thrilled to be partnering with the President's Office and the Music Department to present this. And I hope for those of you that have not been here before, though I know is not very many, you'll come back often. I invite you to pick up a list of all the other jazz programming happening for the next 2 months here at the Logan Center, or our arts guide, which lays out a lot of the public programming happening across the university. Thank you again so much for being here. We're thrilled to be able to, I don't want to say end, but celebrate this residency that we've had with Steve over the last several weeks with this incredible evening tonight, and we're thrilled you're here to join us for it. And to introduce Steve and the Five Elements, please introduce my colleague, Travis Jackson from the Department of Music.
So most people who know our guest this evening, or most people know him for the challenging and invigorating body of work he's produced as a composer and an exemplar of the art of spontaneous composition since the 1980s. It is music that is arresting on its own, but provides the greatest rewards for those who listen closely to the interaction of musicians and to the introduction, reappearance, transformation, and overlapping of melodies, harmonies, rhythmic cycles, and timbres. It is music that is concerned in the broadest sense with time, with the relationships between future, present, and past, and the ways human beings across cultures and over time have made sense of and tried to alter their relationships to time. And if that sounds heady, it is. But it is also music concerned with something more than, say, the idea that complexity is inherently good. When one talks to him, participates in one of the workshops he leads for young musicians or incarcerated youth, or synthesizes the lessons he offers at the website m-bass m-bass.net. I'll say that again, m-bass.net. It becomes clear that his music is about education, about empowerment, about channeling the myriad conflicting lessons of history, of nature, and of the cosmos. Music that shows how the complex emerges from the simple and vice versa. Just as he has drawn on what he's learned from elder musicians since his youth in Chicago, so too has his work had a profound impact on the lives and work of a number of celebrated musicians, working in a variety of styles and in a dizzying array of approaches, or with a dizzying array of approaches. But I should stop talking. There'll be more time for that soon. In the meantime, would you please join me in welcoming for part one of his Rosenberger lecture, The Eagle and the Lark, Steve Coleman and 5 Elements.
We have Jonathan Finlayson on trumpet. Jonathan Finlayson. On bass, Anthony Tidd. Kokai on vocals. Kokai. Thank you, son. And on drums, Sean the Rick Rickman. Oh boy.
It doesn't matter, so when you got it, you got it. There we go. There it is. And it is. stages, pages, when it's like caught within the wind, when I'll be the man, when I win, upon a minute, when he gotta hit it with his sister, then on the second, if he happy metal, the metal, the subtle, the winner, with the heck a win, the hecklers, and when we gotta hit it, when we come on up, when they gotta top, when they wanna spin, when I wanna spin, and when I wanna spin, it gotta be the one that like to spin on the ground, spinning around to the sound, and when you gotta hit it off, and when it's gonna put it down, the metaphor, when I'm metaphor, the oxy-metaphor, and this is what it is when I gotta hit it off, back to Betty Ford, I'm ready for the clinic, and when you hit it, you gotta hit it with the second minute, or matter, when you gotta hit it with the summer, with the summertime, it doesn't matter with the rhyme, when you come up with the rhyme, I gotta hit it when I break it down like an inner time, it doesn't matter, the inner two, but when you gotta hit it, when you come up with it, back, and be the case, to the O, to the K, like an A, to the Y, I, stop, oh, when I gotta hit it, properly, and when I come out like a monopoly, it really doesn't matter when you stop with me, cause stop with me, down with me, not, when I like, I think when it's falling all down, now when you gotta be the every center, I gotta be the one that's swinging into some swords, sad job, the various of various, when I gotta hit it, when they're calling for the various, when I gotta hit it, everything, staring in the face, when you hit the face, you gotta hit it off, when you go to play, status, really gotta hit it off, it really doesn't matter when it's off, I'm playing it like a line holds a golf, and when you gotta hit it off, and when you gotta take it, when you gotta hold it, roll to the top, when you gotta hit it off, when it's not when it's proper, but you gotta reach top, when it's double, when you go, and you gotta when you go.
Rickman on drums. Sean Rickman.
Sean Rickman. Rick. 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 Rick.
Anthony Tidd on bass.
Anthony Tidd on bass.
Jonathan Finlayson on trumpet. Kokai on vocals. Steve Coleman on alto saxophone. Finlayson, Kokai, Coleman, Tidd, Rickman. Thank you. Thank you very much. The theme of this this evening is the eagle and the lark. I don't know if they have that printed anywhere. I didn't see any programs. Is it printed? Oh, okay. Okay. So, I'm just gonna wing this, but once upon a time there was this lark, you know, who had a beautiful song. Can I use this mic that I have right here? Yeah, okay, all right. And this lark could really sing. I mean, like, really, really sing. And so sometimes she would look up to the heavens and look at the sky.
That's what I'm doing right now.
And she would say, oh, it's really too bad that I can't, you know, I have such a beautiful voice. It's too bad I can't sing for the gods, you know, way up in the sky. And so it was sad because of that. Had this beautiful song, but it couldn't share it with the gods. And then there was, one day it was looking up in the sky and it saw this eagle. And this eagle was flying way higher than this lark could ever possibly fly. It was like way up there in the clouds. And the lark was looking at the eagle and thinking, man, this eagle must be able to see the gods because this eagle is like way up there. I wish I could get up that far, you know, but there was no chance. Anyway, one day the lark was, you know, larking around. and the eagle, it saw the eagle coming down and the eagle landed and everything. So the lark took a chance because, you know, eagles eat larks. So the lark took a chance and went up to the eagle and said, you know, introduced itself, said, hi, you know, I have this, I'm just really in admiration of your, you know, that you can fly and soar so high above in the sky, above the clouds and everything. You know, it's great. And the eagle said, well, you know, I've been checking you out too. And you have this like, you know, really beautiful voice and beautiful song that you can sing. And, you know, I'm embarrassed about my voice because it's real raspy and, you know, sounds like Miles Davis. and so the lark said, well, I mean, you know what would be great is if I could get on your back and you could take me up to the clouds because I really want to be able to sing for the gods, you know. And the eagle looked at the lark like it was crazy, you know. And then it thought about it for a second and said, well, you know, my voice is not going to make it, so all right, let's try it, you know. So the lark got on the eagle's back, and the eagle started soaring up. And the lark got afraid at first because it saw the earth, you know, receding, and it was higher than it had ever been. And it was like, oh, this is, you know, this is too deep, you know. And the eagle kept going up and up and up, and you know, after a while they reached the clouds, and the lark started seeing like the rays of the sun coming through the clouds and all this kind of stuff. You know, it started looking like, you know, pictures of the Bible, and and the lark got inspired, and you know. And he said, wow, we must be up here with the gods now. You know, I've never seen anything like this, you know. He saw all these rainbow colors and everything. And so when they got really, really up high, the lark let loose one of its like most glorious sounds, you know, songs, I say, like really glorious. It just starts singing and everything. And then the gods actually noticed. The gods were like, what the, you know, and they heard this beautiful song that they had never heard before. You know, and the eagle was proud because the eagle was now part of it and everything, you know. So this is a parable that I actually live by because the eagle represents logic and the lark represents intuition, as some of you might have guessed, but probably not. And so it shows how when logic and intuition work together, you know, how more can be accomplished than if they worked separately, you know. And it ties into what we do, because a lot of what we do is spontaneous, but also a lot of what we do is based off, it's based on logic. You know, there's a language and there's a syntax and there's different phrases and things like that and calls and responses. But there's also a lot of intuition. We don't know a lot about what we're going to do in the beginning. And so there's a lot of chance taking, and you know, we try to work things out on the spot, you know, and all of that is done by intuition, but it's sort of supported by logic. It's like the lark riding on the eagle. So anyway, that's the. You guys thought I didn't know what I was talking about, did you? So now let the games begin. It's like
So one thing that I'll ask you as a way of getting people to understand a little bit more about the eagle in the group is if you could tell people a little bit about what drum chants are.
Well, this is a concept that actually comes out of West African music, you know. So it's it's something I learned from a mentor of mine named Doug Hammond, and he picked it up from older people like Ed Blackwell and Max Roach and people before that, and they picked it up from people before that, Big Sid Catlett and Cozy Cole, and it goes back, you know, Baby Dies, all these people, you know. So it's really just specific rhythms that sort of act as kind of like melodic anchors, you know, that act as melodies, you know, and we use them in a way that they shape the songs in different ways, you know, the different drum chants, you know. Actually, I could be playing a drum chant on a saxophone too, you know. It's not just drums, you know. Okay. So that's, you know, that's the basic concept, but it's just it's kind of a repeated pattern. Well, Sean's not here, but I can tell, you know, anything he plays could be a drum chant, you know, if he thinks of it that way. It's more of a way of thinking about it, you know. But it's a shape that defines a space for us. We're not thinking in 3/4, 4/4, 5/4, anything like this. You know, these rhythmic phrases, they define the space. And this is the Lark part. We don't even know what time signature we're in or anything like that. You know, the shapes, we just listen to the shapes, and that's how we take it. But if we had to think about it, then the ego comes in and we can figure it out, you know.
Yeah, and part of the reason why I ask that is that anybody who was trying to count tonight was probably having a really hard time.
Well, because there's different things going on at once. I mean, I might be in one time span and somebody else might be in another. You know, and like I said, we don't think about counting because we can't count these multiple things together anyway. Right, you know, so we don't think about it. We just think about the phrases and the way they relate. Okay. You know, and in that sense, it's like African music because you might have a phrase that goes, you know, get, and something else might be crossing over it like in a different way. You know, and you just listen to how they relate to each other. Okay. You know, does that make sense? What I'm saying? Yeah. It's like conversation.
Okay.
Like I'm not talking to you in 4/4, you know.
No,
so.
yeah. You might be talking to like 7 plus 8 plus.
Right, but there's rhythms.
But there's rhythms.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. There's a way to understand
Yeah.
it. So one other thing that is really, really interesting, I think, for a lot of people who listen to your music and who followed you over a long time, is that you've got a lot of different groups with a lot of different names.
Yeah. I'm a name cat.
Your name, Cat.
Yeah.
Can you say a little bit about how you come up with what the names in some ways have to do with the kind of music that you produce for different kinds of ensembles? So you got, Natal Eclipse and Council of Balance and,
We'll have to talk about each one of them, but
Yeah.
But briefly, Natal Eclipse was named after. This is gonna get kind of esoteric. The closest eclipse that happens to your birth is called your natal eclipse.
Okay.
Eclipses move in seasons. There's like 6-month seasons. There's an eclipse every 6 months. You may not see it, but it's happening every 6 months somewhere on Earth. So you guys know what solar eclipses are, right? So I don't have to explain that. So there was when I formed that group, it happened near my birthday and also near an eclipse that happened because during your life, if you live long enough, these eclipses they reoccur in families. And so the same eclipse reoccurred right around the time I formed that group. So I called the group Natal Eclipse because of that.
Okay.
And it was like astrological symbolism, timing, and all that kind of stuff. Council of Balance. A lot of what we do deals with balance. And that group is a big group. So it's like a council, like the Council of Nicaea, the group that convened to canonize the Bible. So this is like Council of Balance. So it's a group that deals with balance.
Okay.
5 Elements, that goes way back. I started 5 Elements before some of you were born. It was like in 1981, and that's referring to the 5 Eastern elements. Earth, Wind, Fire, Wood, and Water. The Chinese elements, and it's in Japan and Korea too. So it refers to that. I mean, not literally to those elements, but what the symbolism of what they represent and everything. Again, it's like a balance thing and dealing with life and everything. And I was in the kung fu movies when I was real little, and then that translated later into like the philosophy. I started looking at the philosophy. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
That's why I'm wearing this jacket all the time.
Yeah. I mean, and part of the reason why I want to get you to talk a little bit about that is that there's so many different things that go into how you think.
Yeah, just your life.
Yeah.
It's with everybody though. It's true with everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you put it out there.
Well, I'm not trying to win Grammys, so I don't have to worry about like what people think.
Okay.
If you're really worried about if you're trying to make hit records, you'd have to operate a little differently.
Right.
So.
Yeah. You'd be counting in 4, for example.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Okay.
you can't have none of this drum chant stuff.
Right.
That's not gonna win you 1 Grammy. It's like.
So the one other thing that I think is really important, and this comes out of the residencies you've been doing over the last several years. Can you say something about why it's important to you to do the kind of educational work that you do?
Well, the important thing that we try to do is the outreach thing. That we always try to make that a part of what we do, no matter which city we go to. It's not easy, because you have to partner with other organizations and things like that. For example, we partnered with Free Right, who is probably here, to work and to go into some detention centers. You can call them jails, whatever. For youth. Just it's not that they're musicians, the people who are detained here, but it's more about they're showing them a wider palette of choices than what they normally have seen. Because some of these kids have come up in gang areas and they've only seen one thing. And they've only seen certain kinds of models and everything. So showing them that there's other choices you can make, and it's amazing because some of these kids come up to us and they say, well, some of them never seen anybody play an instrument before. Because they grew up on rap music or something like that, Right. And so it's amazing to them to see somebody like create something out of nothing. Like one kid told us, he said, "You all just made that up?" And I said, "Yeah, we just made it up just now." He was like, "Wow, how'd you do that?" So it's like it's like eye opening. And then if they ask you how can they get into this, and the guy's like, "Well, when I get out, I want to do something like this, whatever, And so that makes it all worth it. And also we hooked up with this woman is a police officer, Jennifer. What's the last name? Anybody? Huh? Maddox. Yes, Jennifer Maddox. Is she here? Oh, she is here. Like, yep. Okay. And she has a program called Future Ties, you know, which also works with kids in the you know, in the neighborhood and stuff like that, you know, and it's great. I guess it started off as a place where they could come and you know, get a hot meal and do their homework and just, you know, stay out of trouble and all that kind of stuff. But then she turned it into this whole thing. So I called her up because I saw her on CNN. They featured her as a CNN hero.
Okay.
You know, and so I just you know, I just called her up, and then we went in and we did something for them. You know, I mean, we had done stuff like that before in other places in Detroit and stuff like that. But I'm just talking about what we were doing here. You know, I mean, the hardest part is what's two hard parts. One is you have to get some musicians willing to do it.
Right.
You know, I mean, because most musicians are just trying to work and live and survive and feed their family. You know,
For example,
they're like, you know, look, man, I'm just trying to. You got to pay me, you know. It's like,
right.
You know, it's like, you know. So there's that, you know. I mean, so I have some cats I've been working with for a long time, and they're troopers, and you know, they enjoy doing that as well as performing. You know, I have to make sure they perform so that they, you know, don't leave. You know,
Right.
But at the same time, you know, they enjoy doing that. You know, and then the other part is trying to get the support to, you know, rent the house and come here and fly here and, you know, pay the cats and all that, you know. So there's two parts that's hard. So I formed my nonprofit to try to help with that. It's called M-Base Concepts Inc. You know, M-Base Concepts. And so, you know, we try to do that, and we've done it in several cities. This is our third time in Chicago. Yeah, doing this. We did it 3 times in the Oakland area. We did it 3 times in Los Angeles. We did it twice in Detroit. We did it in Philly. We did it in New York. We go overseas. We do it in Paris and Salvador, Brazil, and in Cuba, Havana, Cuba. You know, different places. You know, Madras, India. You know, so but it's not easy. I mean, it's hard to get to these places. You know, you have to organize everything and stuff like that. You know, but we always do the outreach and the workshops and things like that everywhere we go. That's always a part of it, as well as performances. You know, you know. So that's, you know. I'm hoping that other people will pick up on that and other people will do it, because I hope it spreads. You know, I mean, that's my hope, because musicians, you know, just coming to see somebody perform is one thing. That's good, you know, but there were a lot of musicians, I'm from Chicago. There's a lot of older musicians in Chicago who helped me out along the way, you know. So you just try to figure, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without these cats, you know, Von Freeman and all these guys who really, really helped me out, you know. And so I'm trying to figure out a way to give back, you know, I mean, and maybe I can inspire somebody else like they inspired me. So that's, you know. Yeah.
And so I'll say one thing before we take questions, if there are any intrepid people in the audience who are willing. Intrepid. Who are willing to pose questions to Steve. But one thing, well, there are many things that are really, you know, just fascinating about what you have done over the span of your career. But what's interesting to me, too, is that you are such a devout student of the history of music writ large.
Well, you know what Malcolm and them say, you got to know where you're coming. Malcolm X, I mean. You got to, you know, if you have a problem, you study history and you look at the people who've had that same problem in the past and how they solved their problem, or even how they didn't solve that problem, can inform you on how, you know, you're going to solve yours. So you got to study history for that.
Yeah. So. I mean, you know, just to make the point really clear, I've had him as a guest in a couple of my classes, and it's a quiz for me when he's in there, because he's rattling off names of old musicians, like, you know, oh, such and such, what year was he born? And, you know, the thing is, he knows every year when all these cats were born and where they were born. And, you know, and little...
But I don't know my sister's birthday.
Well, that I can't help you with.
Like an idiot savant, you know.
So do we have anyone in the audience who wants to?
Yes, sir.
Any tips on soloing?
Any what? Tips? Okay, he's asking me any tips on soloing.
And there are a couple of mics in the aisleways, by the way, for other people.
You must be a musician, so... Any tips on soloing? I mean, the biggest tip I can give on doing anything, including soloing, is if you want to become a great shoemaker, you got to hang around great shoemakers. You know, I mean, you know, right? You want to become a great basketball player, you don't hang around tennis players, you hang around great basketball players. So if you want to become a great soloist, you have to hang out with great soloists, hopefully older than you. You know, the older the better. You know, but you hang around older people because they've seen things that you'll probably never see, and they've experienced things that you'll never experience, and they've met people that you'll never have the chance to meet, and so they can teach you so much. You know, in West Africa they have this proverb where they say every person's a book. You know, I mean, so I mean, you know, it's you really have to like look at the elders, you know, for the information and everything, because they've seen a lot. You know, my father used to tell me, you don't become old being no fool. You know, it's like you know. So yeah, that's the best way. And then of course you study them. Now we have media, so you can study them on record, you can study them on video. You know, you got YouTube, you got all these amazing tools that you can use to see people. You know, I mean, no matter who it is. You know, I mean, it could be Public Enemy, it could be Coleman Hawkins, whoever it is. You know, you could study all these people on film and stuff like that, and you just have to like really study. But if you can find some living people that you can hang out with, that's the best thing, because that impacts you. You know, so find people who are already. There's always going to be somebody doing what you want to do who's better. You don't have to worry about that. But you have to. Sometimes you might have to go to where they are. You know, I mean, they might not be right in your neighborhood or right around the block. You know, they might be in another city or something like that. You know, so. But that's the best. That's the best advice, is to get around people who really know what they're doing, and hang out with them. Hang out. You might have to bug them. You might have to, you know, run a few chores or something. You know, what you got to do. Got to do what you got to do. You know. I used to carry Sonny Stitt's horn around, and you know, just I mean, because I was trying to figure out how this man was doing this, you know, like, you know, so you know, you have to, you know, you might have to go to, you know, store and grab a few things or whatever, you know. It's like somebody else had a question.
The woman in the middle.
Oh, in the middle here.
Synovio, is that how you say it?
Synovio, yeah.
Why?
Sorry.
Why?
Why synovial joints? How much time you have? I look at a lot of, I mean, I connect a lot of things to music. I mean, for us, everything is music, really. I mean, it doesn't matter. It can be people, it can be whatever, you know. So I was hanging out with this guy named Milford Graves, who's a great drummer, you know. He's still alive. And he played with Albert Eiler and a couple of people in the 60s. That's I guess that was his heyday. But he's also like a kind of, I guess you can call him a Renaissance man and a shaman, you know, in a sense. And he studied a lot of other things. And one of the things he studied was healing and music and all this kind of stuff. So he was into all this anatomy thing, you know. And so when I started studying with him, I started hanging out with him, basically. I wasn't formally studying with him, but I started hanging out with him. He started telling me, you know, what he was into and how he looked at music, how he looked at rhythm and all this. I got really intrigued. And one of the things I was intrigued by was his knowledge of the human body. You know, and how he looked at like the different systems, the immune system and the circulation system and the respiratory system and all these different things. And so I got deeply into like some of these texts that he was talking about, and there was something he gave me on skeletons and how the joints were connecting and all that in the body, you know. And so the joints have something called synovial fluid. I don't know if we have any doctors, and I don't want to embarrass myself. You know, it might be some doctor. You don't know what he's talking about, you know. But the joints have like synovial fluid, you know, in it to allow, it's almost like oil on a, you know, I mean, you know, they allow you to move and everything, you know. And the ligaments and all that are connecting, you know, everything. And so, you know, ligaments, sinews, and you know, the different things are connecting either bone to tissue or tissue to tissue or whatever, you know. And so I got intrigued by all these different joints, like pivot joint and swivel joint, and you know, and all these different joints and how they move, you know. I mean, like your head, you know, how it's going this way, and it's one joint involved, and this way it's another joint involved, and it's going this way and it's another joint involved, you know. And the wrist, which really has a lot of different types of joints in it and everything. And so I started making analogies to music and seeing how I could make connections between different musical figures that mirrored the way these joints were moving. So that's the short answer of why the album is called Synovial Joints. You know, it has to do with the way the music is moving and everything. Not nobody. I don't expect anybody to know that, but like I said, since I'm not trying to win Grammys, I don't have to worry about it too much. People can just look at it and say, okay, whatever. And most of the people who follow me, they kind of know I'm weird anyway, so it doesn't. They expect to go on a journey. But that's the short of it. It's I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, and there's some more information about that in the liner notes for the second most recent album, which has that name, Synovial Joints.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And and some of these albums are on sale outside if you go outside, but don't expect to see any Grammys. Somebody else had a question. Where were they?
We've got one here and one here.
Okay. Yes, sir. Mr. Coleman. Yes. How you doing?
Student, you're constantly a student. I'd like to know, what do you learn from these young cats now?
What do I learn from young people? Well, everybody in my band is younger than me, so I'm learning from them all the time. But I'm even learning from people in their 20s, and sometimes we learn from children because they're incredibly creative. We did a workshop for like people who are like kindergarten age, this place, what was the name of the place, Kate, in Hyde Park? The little school? I think it was Hyde Park Art Center, but it was like little kids, real little, and so it's a challenge because you got to figure out, well, how are you going to relate to them, so what we do with real little kids is that we start with their games. They have, especially the girls, they have all these these patty cake type things that's quite complex, these games, and the rhythms are so they'll play the game and then we'll make a song out of the rhythms of what they're playing, and they get a kick out of that because they see what we're doing, but we're learning at the same time. Because we have to figure out, like I said, they're not thinking about music. They're just thinking about the rhythm of the words and the movements, And then we have to try to figure out, okay, so how are we going to make that into something musically? And typically, it's not something that we've done before. So in the process of doing that, we learn something, So we're actually learning from them, and they're learning from us because they recognize that we're playing the same. They can feel that we're playing the same thing that they're doing, So it's kind of a symbiotic. Is that right word?
Yeah.
It goes back and forth, and I learn from young musicians who are just starting out. I learn from people I'm teaching because sometimes they'll ask me questions that either I don't know or force me to think about it, how to answer the question. And in the course of answering it, we might do some demonstrations and we'll investigate what they're talking about. And I might stumble on something that I learned. You learn all the time, every day, And I learn from architecture. That's something I learned a lot from because I'm similar to the joint thing. You look at how things are structured, different kinds of columns and all this kind of stuff, and I don't know much about it, but you can still be inspired by anything. One of the things I'm inspired by is the whole thing with ancient Egypt and ancient Greece, where they had constructing things with these golden mean proportions and all this kind of stuff. So I use a lot of that in the way I structure music. And so. That's it's kind of that'd be lightweight to you, but for me it's a heavy, But so why don't you want to tell everybody who you are? Oh no, okay. He said, "Oh no." All right, we'll move on. There was another question.
Right here on the
He's asking how we present new material and how we work up a new piece together. Somebody just asked me this before we came on stage. We do a lot of stuff spontaneously. So there's a lot of singing to each other and clapping and things like that. There's a lot of just taking a figure and developing it, taking a melody and developing it, all this kind of thing. Or it might be parts of something else, that we use. The way I'm answering your question, it almost sounds like it's anything, but as I was saying before, we do have a language. We understand how things fit together a certain way. It's sort of like, I don't know, the difference between English and French. You may be able to hear the sounds in French, but if you don't know the meanings of the words and the way things connect and everything, you can't really have a conversation, So in every group, they have a way of putting things together. It doesn't matter whether it's us or the Modern Jazz Quartet or whoever, They have a way that they put things together and a certain understanding that the members of the group have, And so I've known these guys for a long time. The youngest member in the group is the trumpet player, and I've been playing with him since 2000. So that's, the other people I've been playing with since the mid-90s. So I've known them a long time, so we understand each other, and it's like a family kind of thing where how if you have a really good friend, you could look at them and just raise your eyebrow, and they know what you mean, you could talk about people right in front of them, they never even know, stuff like that, So that, there's a lot of that going on, And, you know, sometimes we make mistakes. There's lots of mistakes we make during the concert, and we take the mistakes and turn them into, you know, they become the source of new things sometimes, you know. Sometimes, like, there was one song that I made up where I was just kind of fooling around with my horn, and then we just went into something, you know. So it could come in a lot of different ways, and when we rehearse that process. We don't always rehearse songs. We rehearse process. But basically, recently, I've been doing songs two ways. Either I improvise something, and then I develop it and bring it in, or we improvise something collectively and then develop it. You know, I mean, so there's two ways, you know. But all of the things on Synovial Joints and on Natal Eclipse album, which is called Morphogenesis, those were things that I improvised myself, you know, usually at home or somewhere else. One thing was in a restaurant. And then I develop it, I transcribe it, orchestrate it, whatever, and then I brought it into the group because those were larger groups. There was a lot of people reading and everything, and some of the people couldn't improvise. But with this group, I don't necessarily have to do that. I could do things collectively right in the rehearsal. So there was one thing that we played. I think the first thing we played, we just, you know, did that the other day, and we just spontaneously figured it out in rehearsal, and then sort of developed how we were going to do it, you know. But it was never written down or anything like that. So there's a lot of rehearsing in the process of how we do things. That's why we can do it spontaneously when we're on stage, because we rehearse that process, you know, rather than rehearse the exact song. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. You want the mic? It's coming. It's right there.
Yeah, so we've seen you quite a bit when you come to Chicago, and we really appreciate it. And we hope you're coming back next year.
Who's we?
My husband.
Okay. The silent one.
Yeah. But I'm curious, you know, I've read that you get inspired or you study rhythms in nature, you know, and natural things that happen. And I was wondering how you bring that in and then bring in melody and tone out of those rhythms.
Well,
because a drum chant it's just a rhythm, right? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, the secret is that tonal information and rhythmic information is really the same. It's just all vibration, you know. It's really the same. I mean, they've done experiments where they've like, if you tap a pencil, you know what I'm saying already, but you tap a pencil on the table, you know, and you speed it up, it becomes a tone. You know, they have to use a computer to do that because you can't tap that fast, but you speed it up, you know, to like, 40 taps a second, 60 taps a second, 100 taps a second or whatever, which is really fast. Obviously, a person can't tap that fast. You know, then you start to hear tone, you know. So there's a relationship between temporal events and tonal events anyway, you know. So we take that literally, and we know sometimes we use some of the same systems that we use in tonal stuff in rhythmic stuff. For example, major scale. I'm gonna give you one short example. It might not click, but you guys know what a major scale is? Okay, so you have, it's not that. Okay. La da 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 da. That's a major scale, okay? Okay, now, if you know anything about intervals, the intervals are tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. That's the pattern of the intervals. So you can convert that to numbers. You can say 2, 2, 1, 2, 2, 2, 1. Okay? So if you did this, I want that to fall. Where this is 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 1. That's 1, okay? 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2. That's the same pattern as a major scale, you know. Now, one of the things I study is that, and that's been since ancient times. And then you have other things too, like pentatonic scales and how they match other rhythmic patterns and things like that. This is already here. This is not something I made up. It's been here for a long, long time. The ancient Greeks were talking about this. The Egyptians, it goes way back, you know. So I wonder, like, well, why do humans do this, and why do they do it all over the planet? Why are these structures here, and why are they very similar across the tonal world and across the rhythmic world and everything? You know, it has something to do with the way we're structured, because elephants aren't doing claves and beating on bongos, and neither are giraffes and centipedes and all these other creatures. You know, it's just humans that are doing this. You know, but There are things in nature, certain things that birds do and things like that. Birds are one of the closest to us, but also some mammals, like dolphins, whales, porpoises, things like that, and then there's some kinds of monkeys that do things that's reminiscent of what we do. They have symbols for certain things, like they have words, which is something that humans have, but you could say this circle means this or the square means this, that whole thing of attaching a meaning to something, they have that too. So there's some monkeys that have, like I was telling you earlier, that have words for leopard, words for snake, words for eagle, all the things that can eat them, because that's what's important in their world, right? They have to survive, and so the first humans, those were their first words too. Things that dealt with danger and all this kind of stuff, So you have all these things, and I listen to them, and rhythm's everywhere. You can't escape that. It's everywhere in the universe. It's with the planets, everything, And so it's real easy to turn it into rhythm. It's not so easy to deal with the pitch world, but humans have been doing it for a long time. So I have a lot of clues because there's been a whole bunch of people before me for millennia, for thousands of years that have done this. And so you can do a lot of research, and you can get a lot of help from all these people who've done research on this before. We just do it our way. I don't think we're doing anything new, but we're doing it our way. It's sort of like Frank Sinatra, my way. Is that Frank Sinatra?
That's Frank Sinatra.
Yeah, okay. So that there's a lot of things that are repeating. You see people doing the same things, over and over through time. But they're doing it in different ways because the technology's changing, the time's changing, the mindset's changing. It's mainly the technology that's changing, and then the humans are changing according to technology. The fact that we all have iPhones and internet and all this has changed us somehow. We're not the same as people in Isaac Newton's time, before they had electricity and all that kind of stuff. You might think you're the same, but you're basically the same, but something's different. And a lot of that has to do with technology. And nothing goes backwards. People always talking about bringing something back, bringing jobs back. Nothing goes backwards, Once they have cannons, nobody's going to say, well, maybe I'll go back to the catapult. No, that's not, that's, you don't move backwards, You just keep moving forward, right? So
one thing that is a feature of any conversation with Steve Coleman is that you can go down a lot of really fascinating rabbit holes and
never come out.
And no. Amazingly, we always come back to the surface, and then we find another one. But we are, I think, out of time for this public conversation.
You got the
now.
signal?
Yeah, it's the signal. But I want to ask everyone one more time to congratulate Steve Coleman on being our Rosenberger Medal winner.
You can follow me on Facebook, M-Based Concepts, just one word, M-Based Concepts, no hyphen or nothing, facebook.com/M-Based Concepts. And you can also contact me that way and, get in touch, and that's it.
Bill?
All right. One more time, a round of applause for Steve Coleman, the Five Elements, and Travis Jackson. And the conversation can continue not only online, but right now. We invite you all to join us in the Upper Gidwitz lobby for a reception, for informal conversation as we continue to celebrate Steve and the Five Elements. Thank you all so much for being here tonight.